You're segueing into change management in the public sector and how this is also, you need to take another dimension of change management because you're dealing with regulations.
Yeah.
So if you continue explore, I think this is...
But if we try to define the topic at hand, so to speak, regulation is a big problem in many ways. And we had new laws coming in 2018 that we had to adapt to and change to, right? And you had worked quite a lot with GDPR as well, right?
Yes, and I worked with this in unions.
Yeah.
So I'm working within those organizations, and I think when you tell somebody about GDPR, everybody can agree that it's good that our personal information is protected.
Yeah.
In a union, I mean, they work for the good of people. They don't want to sell bad products. So the challenge is, okay, why do we have to change everything? Because we don't want to do bad things. And especially unions, to be a member of a union is a critical information, just like medical information and religion and so on. Sensitive data, yeah. So the challenge is really, okay, this is a regulation or law that we think is good, but why do we need to change? Because it's really a hassle. You can't send emails, you can't have your old data, you need to go to the system, it changes a lot, and you need to close your door and close your computer, and why do we need to do that? And it is to protect us. And with
so the intention is good, really.
The intention is good, and to have people understand that even if your intention is good, you need to protect. And in Sweden, it's not a dramatic thing to be a member of a union, but it is in other countries. And a lot of people that come here come from countries where it is, and it might change here as well. You don't know. So we need to conform with this. Sometimes they get really annoyed with us when they can say, oh, we want to do this really good thing for our members. And say, oh, you can't do that because that is not the purpose that you collected their personal data. So you can't do it. Or you have to have security, so it's impossible to work in the system. So that is the challenge. Of course, we want to protect with laws our information, and that is when it comes to social services for municipalities. When you have income support, there has been some AI implemented in municipalities, but there are court cases right now where it's being questioned if it's right to do it that way. So it can help, but is it allowed?
So I mean, I've seen a lot of bad examples of how GDPR's, implications or ramifications of being implemented has turned out rather poorly, even though the intention is bad. And
did you mean the intention was bad?
No, sorry, intention was good. Sorry, Thank you for correcting
Freudian
me.
slip, I would say.
Intention, of course, is great, and we want to make sure that we preserve the privacy of people. But then it can potentially hinder the innovation of, what can you use data for? And if you don't have signed off for using the data for a specific purpose, you're not allowed to do so without, the explicit consent of the user. So what would you say your recommendation is in how to apply GDPR from a change management point of view that still allows some form of innovation? Do you have any suggestions there? Or?
First of all, it's really a management issue, the top management to involve. It's sort of, okay, it must be an IT thing. But it is a management issue to look through your processes, because a lot of things you do because you've always done it. Should we do it that way? Can we change? So I would say that GDPR is an enabler for really optimizing your processes and making it better.
That's a new view.
That's a new view. Let's explore that one. How do you mean?
Instead of doing a lot of manual work where you collect personal information, store it locally on computers, and you lose it and you don't have control, you force it into being used into quite a locked and protected system. So you have to log into the system, you have to work in the system, and even if you don't like the system, so how can we adapt it in the best possible way? But if we do everything from there, we don't need all the other things. And in many organizations, when new systems are implemented, what we spoke about before, you don't go all the way. So you implement some steps of work, but people still work manually around the system and do things. So GDPR is really an opportunity to clean that up and to get people working according to processes. It doesn't mean that everybody will like it, but you will have to look at, okay, why is this important to us? Why? Of course, it's a law, but what is the value for our organization? How can we benefit from this to clean up and start working? And at the same time, you must be able to work. You can't build, of course, we can put a lot of IT security, but it would take you 45 minutes to get started in the morning. Do you want that? No. Okay, then you have to change.
But I think this is quite profound, and almost first I thought it was provocative how it can be a GDPR as an enabler. But the interesting thing is that we have already concluded in other topics that when we talk about the data and AI divide, the normal companies versus the super giants, we have already concluded several times that they don't really have a problem with GDPR because they have so strong systems and they have so strong processes around data. So for them to have the data lineage sorted and get that sorted, it's not a problem. And what Anna is saying right now, instead of looking as GDPR as a major pain to try to implement that on your shitty manual processes, use that as a leverage to get into systems that are more robust.
But let me then be a devil's advocate in some way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do agree. I mean, we should have more control of the data we use and what we use it for, and have routines to manage, erasure and whatever, and explanations for whatever kind of decision support system you're using. But it is also really hard for SMEs or small companies to implement all these kind of things and make sure that they have documented routines for all these kind of things. So it is also in some way hurting the innovation in small companies. Wouldn't you agree?
That depends on, I would say, on the view that you take on the documentation. I mean, nobody says that you need to buy a special program and put your processes in there. You can actually you can have a piece of paper and write the process and define it.
But how do you know it's valid so you don't get sued for like 4% of your revenue then?
You need to make sure, and that is the task of a manager, are people working according to the process. But that's one thing, that you follow your own routines. But how do you even know if the routines that you define are valid and conforming to GDPR? I would say that GDPR focuses more on the purpose. Are you allowed to have the data, and what is the purpose? And then the other part is about information security. How do you secure your data? And do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, maybe. I'm just a bit subjective on this matter because I've seen a number of companies that have a really trouble.
I think the bottom line is very few companies seems to have grasped what GDPR really is and how to tackle it. So they go knee-jerk reaction, better safe than sorry, and they stop doing things they should be doing. But you're actually talking now from a GDPR literate standpoint and highlight that, well, if you really understand what it is, do the process, have it documented, and then you can cope. So it's like one part of the change management is to adopt and be data literate or GDPR literate.
Yeah, and if I may comment on that, what I think when GDPR was announced, there was a huge rally. You had lawyers and consultants.
Hype.
Really. And I mean, if you read, I heard on the podcast that you had also read the original document. And if you slam that onto the table and say, people, we are going to help you with this. I mean, you can do almost anything. But if you look at the bottom line, what is it that you are required to do? And if you have an incident, how shall you handle that? You will not get fined because you have an incident, but if you don't learn from it and change, then you will be. And if you have not a good case for why you have the data, and I mean, you don't publish it on the front of your office, you have tried to the best, and you explain, okay, this is how we tried. Then the integrationsmyndigheten, they can say, okay, you made a fault in your thinking, but you can never get away by saying, oh, we didn't think.
It's good in some sense, and let me.
I can tell this is a tough subject for you.
No, but as I said, I think the intention is great. But let me quote. This is a professor in law in Sweden, and she, I think, phrases very, very well, saying, "Of course, the intention is good. The problem is that the lack of knowledge, the uncertainty in how to implement it, that is the problem.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
you know about how to implement it, it's not really a big thing. The problem is that we don't really know how to do it, and the knowledge is lacking." So I think, speaking about the AI agenda that was formally launched this week, and one of the things they recommend there, which I think is rather good, is that the new integrationsmyndigheten, how do you say it in English? I don't know, a privacy agency, I guess, or something, which was previously Datainspektionen in Sweden. They perhaps should not only, validate and confirm that people are abiding by GDPR, but they should also guide people in how to do it.
Absolutely.
That's similar to actually Finansinspektionen, yes. And they actually do have also guidance in saying, if you follow these rules, you will be rather safe. So not only having oversight committee, so to speak, but also having some kind of guidance and giving examples, this is how you should do it. Yeah. If we do that, then perhaps more companies could be more confident in actually using data and AI and still abiding by GDPR.
Yeah, because I completely agree there, because that is what many have been asking for when we approach that date, 25th of May.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what shall we do? Is this right or wrong? And what they came back saying is, well, we need some lawsuits and see what
you have to wait for someone gets sued, and that's kind of a weird thing to say.
How was it interpreted? And that's law. Yeah. How was it interpreted?
Yeah.
And so that I totally agree. But I still think they are doing a good job on trying to guide. But really, it's a situation where they can say this is what it's like, because it's
but maybe we can get the inside track a little bit, Anna, because I know you're working in some projects together with, you are teaming up in different projects, and one of your teammates is a certified from Datainspektionen or the Integrity-myndigheten, right?
Certified data protection officer, dataskyddsombud.
Dataskyddsombud, according to
to the regulations, yes.
And Datainspektionen owns, or now Integritetsmyndigheten owns this regulation in Sweden.
They own the responsibility for GDPR. I don't know if they know.
Also, the GDPR is European law, but I think they own the enforcement, like Finansinspektionen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So when you have worked, from this context, do you have any inside tracks on the thinkings? Because we have actually had that on this podcast to understand how does Finansinspektionen work versus Datainspektionen, and one part which is a little bit where I think Finansinspektionen is doing a great job in this, how these go consultative and guiding around their job is quite smart. And have you seen any of those ideas? Have you heard anything about that?
That would be my wingman or wingwoman. Yeah. She's the one that knows about that. So I completely lean on her. And so I wouldn't be the right one to say anything on the topic. But I completely agree about the need. And what I know, for example, the unions, they got together and had some lawyers, and they sat down and said, how shall we interpret this from a union point of view? And then everybody sort of said, okay, this is how we will, and had some communication. So, I mean, that's one way to try to handle it, but still there's a lot of work to do.
Speaking about how to handle it, what do you think about these huge terms of service kind of agreement that you sign when you use whatever kind of service, saying, yes, I accept, and then, you have no idea what they really want to use it for, but still everyone does it. Do you think that's a good thing?
I mean, it's completely worthless. That's my personal point of view. I mean, when you're on a website, you want to book that trip, you want to buy that book, you want to get that information. And it's like, I mean, it's the same as when you open a new bank account or where you buy a car, you don't read all the...
Exactly, yeah.
So everybody just clicks, I accept.
Yeah. And obviously that's a big problem, right? Because it makes the big companies being able to handle these kind of things, because they just change something in the small lining, so to speak, and then they can do whatever. But for other companies, they can't.
Yeah, and what people feel is that GDPR is just an obstacle because I have to click this every time. Instead of thinking, what does this really mean? It means I'm giving my whole life away. Maybe I should stop here.
Why should I give you cookies? That's the...
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I have a comment on that. Maybe those people who wrote the GDPR should have taken change management into calculation when they did it.
Thank you. That
This was the comment. So
awesome.
How do we maybe change?
Isn't that a really profound thing? GDPR was a good intention, but it was horribly managed in some way.
And if we bring change management perspective into also regulation topics, how will this be implemented? How will we impact this? I bet you the laws will look different.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That's a really profound. I think we have to close on that, because that was such a good statement.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
And it really tells the need for change management as well. I mean, if you don't do this properly, it will have really bad
do it
impact.
early, right? Think about when you are early into your project or policy. How will this be implemented, and what changes do we need to have as tools around this for this to fly?
Yeah.